again. Since the 1980s, I was actually in broadcast, radio broadcast. I directed and produced my own radio program for the sake of excellence education of our three gifted and talented geniuses and others like them. I also went to college for journalism and clept several courses, and including starting my own newspaper in the Black community. And I had quite a bit of exposure by doing that within my community, as well as connecting with others in other communities and connecting with other newspapers, Black owned, as well as major white newspapers like the Panama City News Herald and the Tallahassee Democrat, Capital Outlook. In Tallahassee, it was owned by both white and Black. I joined in with the Pensacola Voice newspaper, and I also became the public relation director for the Florida State Voters League, as well as received an honorary certificate from the voters several different organizations, as well as one major newspaper in Washington, D.C., who acknowledged me for writing on gifted and talented, and also being the correspondent of Black gifted and talented children, and that was requested by an organization in Massachusetts. At any rate, I've done a lot of things, and as Lacrosse would say, we become everything we need to become, and that's putting it mildly and paraphrasing it. As parents, we become everything that we need to become in order to excellently educate our children and others like them. So today, again, I'm Gloria Keith with Action Speaks, Heritage Excellence Education Journal. And Action Speaks has been copywritten since before the 1980s, but actually we started our newspaper in January 15th, 1980. So I will be reading, again, I'm trying to finish this 90-page book with you, and I will be reading another 7 pages, hopefully, from the book, The Black Man in America, 1932 through 1954, by Florence Jackson. And at the end of the book, I'll tell you more about the author. As of now, I'm reading it because it definitely compares with the things that we are going through today. But I want you to figure it out for yourselves as individuals and what the readings mean for you. And it's okay to copy the video so that you can get a better understanding. It's okay also if you want to write to me or send me a message. You can send it at actionspeaks1980@gmail.com. And of course, I have a website. It's called Action Speaks, Heritage Excellence Education Journal. And the address of that is Action Speaks, GJHK2021.com. Okay. And I am working on it, completing this website through WordPress. I also have an audible program, an audio program through Anchor. Okay, and that's ANCHOR. And you will see my many different briefs on that. So if you are interested in me and knowing the truth about me, I ask you to visit wherever you see my name. My full name is Gloria J. Hunt Keith, and you can find me online all over. And probably since 2008, I believe you can find me. I'm no longer on Facebook, but I contributed a lot to Facebook when it first came out, and joined many other Black artists who had sites under Facebook. So you may still see a lot of that there. All right, today we're going to start with page 8 of the book, The Black Man in America, 1932 through 1954 by Florence Jackson. We'll start today with support for equal opportunities. Although New Deal programs provided a number of jobs, unemployment continued to be a problem for Blacks. One attempt to secure jobs for Blacks began in St. Louis, Missouri, where the local Urban League chapter led a boycott of a white-owned chain store. The boycott had special meanings because while most of the store's customers were Black, all of its employees were white. The boycott was a success. It encouraged Black people to seek more jobs and other types of work. The Urban League then launched a Jobs for Negro movement. The movement soon spread from St. Louis to other cities. Black people in Pittsburgh, Chicago, Cleveland, and other smaller Midwestern cities joined in the movement. Gradually, more Blacks found jobs, but many whites hired them only because of the pressure and not because they believed in equal opportunities. Eleanor Roosevelt, the president's wife, showed by word and action that she believed in equality of opportunity for all. She visited and spoke with members of Black organizations about job opportunity problems. Then she reported back to the president. The president himself began to mention the problems of Black people in his speeches and during press conferences. In January 1935, when President Roosevelt presented his annual message to Congress, a new attitude toward the difficulties of Black people was evident. President Roosevelt said, In spite of our efforts and in spite of our talk, we have not weeded out the privileged, and we have not effectively lifted up the underprivileged. Although he did not mention any group by name, for the first time, the president began to look beyond. And this shows you the front page. And I hope you can see that. It shows you the front page of a newspaper, active newspaper during that time between 1932 1954. So you may look that up, and you may be able to find more in the Library of Congress. So look that up online, and you may find more information in reference to those times. And this is Eleanor Roosevelt, President Roosevelt's wife. You learn more about her also. The masses and into the needs of the smaller numbers who made up the most underprivileged. Eleanor Roosevelt continued to be a helpful friend to blacks. She became a leading figure who brought the needs of Black Americans to the attention of government leaders. I should have closed that window. I'm very sorry. But I want to finish this. She also made the leaders aware of highly respected and talented Black citizens. Although Blacks had long played a role in government, under the New Deal, their leadership became more noticeable through the establishment of a Black cabinet. This was a group of knowledgeable Blacks whom Roosevelt called on to advise him in the areas of economics, politics, and civil rights. The Black cabinet provided the president with direct and honest advice on how to improve the conditions of underprivileged Americans, most of whom were Black. Among the members of the Black cabinet were Mary McLeod Bethune, Ralph Bunche, William H. Hasty, Eugene Nickel Jones, Lawrence A. Oxley, Robert C. Weaver, Sadie T. M. Alexander, and Robert L. Vann. The members of the Black cabinet later went on as individuals to do work that benefited both Black and white Americans. Other Blacks were able to take advantage of openings in government jobs. Some of them were filled by lawyers, engineers, architects, economists, interviewers, office managers, and librarians. Others were clerks, secretaries, and stenographers. These new workers proved that equal opportunities could be a reality for all Americans. Blacks and labor movements. White unions continued to resist including Black workers as members. But Black union leader A. Philip Randolph went right on fighting to end discrimination in the American Federation of Labor, the AFL. He saw that his sleeping car porters union would have to lead the fight to organize Black workers and end discrimination in the AFL. By 1933, the sleeping car porters had 35,000 members. That was half the total number of Blacks in the AFL. But even with this strength in numbers, Randolph found that the AFL refused to fully recognize Black workers. He suggested that a committee of 5 be formed to investigate the condition of Black labor. The committee was formed, but against Randolph's wishes, the 5 members were white. In 1934, the Committee of 5 began to work. Its findings were to be reported in the 1935 Union Convention. At the convention, however, the report was omitted. The committee had recommended that barring Blacks from membership, denying them representation at conventions, or establishing Jim Crow locals must be stopped. It also proposed that Negro Federal Union be discontinued and the members transferred to mixed locals. Meanwhile, the industrial workers were demanding that those in mass production be organized on an industry-wide basis rather than by crafts. The AFL leadership refused to accept the idea. Finally, on November 9, 1935, John L. Lewis, a white leader of the United Mine Workers, called a meeting from which there developed a new group, the Congress of Industrial Organization, CIO. Here's A. Philip Randolph delivering a speech at the beginning of his career as a labor leader. And here's the picture of A. Philip Randolph. I hope you see that. And you can always look up a picture of him online, of course. Here's a fundraising group of the United Federal Workers of America collecting donations of a citizen committee meeting. And you can see that union meeting and the secretary, of course. Most of them are Black. The CIO made it clear that they plan to organize the mass production industries and that all races were to be included. In fact, special appeals were made to Black workers during early campaigns. Many Black workers joined the CIO, but others were either afraid to or were uneasy because of an earlier bad experience with white unions. I believe that was the case in this new city that I'm in Alabama, I'm told that there were only 6 people from uh, our zip code that voted in the 2020 election, presidential election. Surprising, but I haven't yet done any research on that. The real spirit for moving Black people ahead in the labor movement came from Black youth. In 1938, as an outcome of the Second Negro Youth Conference, a program emerged that outlined the desires and hopes for a brighter future for Black people. One part of the program stated, "We feel that the trade union movement must stand at the heart of any program that we may adopt. That is why we urge further unionization of Negroes and the encouragement of their active participation in bona fide labor unions, although at the same time we recognize and condemn the openly discriminatory policies of some unions. We want the unions to give us an adequate vocational guidance program and an opportunity for apprenticeship training. We ourselves must work for the future opening up of job opportunities for Negro youth in the federal, state, and local government and in private industry." That was a speech from the youth of Black America. These hopes and desires became the dream of many Black Americans. New church leaders. Let's see what this has to say about it. The Black church had a long tradition as the place where potential youth leaders were discovered and allowed to develop. After World War I, however, Black newspapers began to compete with the church in working for social justice. At times, the church was criticized for not responding to the social and economic problems of Black people. Didn't I tell you this is definitely compared with where we are still today in 2021? And this was 1932 through 54. By the 1930s, however, the Black church was again in lead. In Chicago, J.C. Austin, pastor of Pilgrim Baptist Church, led the Urban League's Jobs for Negroes campaign that was spreading throughout Midwestern cities. In New York City, Reverend John H. Johnson of St. Martin's Protestant Episcopal Church actively led the Citizens League for Fair Play. The league picketed white-owned stores that failed to hire Black clerks. Their motto, "Don't buy where you can't work," drew attention to discrimination against Black. The league's work proved successful, and white businessmen in Harlem began to hire Blacks. Other clergymen worked in political campaigns to get out the black vote for the Democratic Party. Elder Solomon Lightfoot Micah, founder of a religious movement in Washington, D.C., often campaigned for Democratic candidates. He also founded the Good Neighbor League, to feed, clothe, and house victims of depression. Another religious leader with an interracial and international following was George Baker, who was known as, yes, Father Divine. I know you've heard of him. In 1919, he organized a small religious group to Sayville, Long Island, New York. Many of Father Divine's followers left their old churches to join him. In time, he was referred to as, quote, God, unquote. Father Divine directed his attention to the needs of his followers. In eastern and midwestern cities, he opened peace missions. And this is a picture of Father Divine at that time. Hopefully you can see that. If not, look it up online, Father Divine. You'll find a picture of him, I'm sure. And that picture was Father Divine addressing a convention of his followers in New York City. And that was in 1936. Here's a picture of a procession of Father Divine. He had a lot of followers, and that, of course, was in New York, too. There may still be some followers of Father Divine's preachings and prophetic quotes. Okay, that page ended with peace missions called Heavens, where jobs and shelter were made available. This policy helped to emphasize his motto, Father will provide. During the Depression, and I'm still reading on page 19, I will complete my reading perhaps on the next page, or I may finish with this chapter called Heavens, where jobs and shelter were made available. This policy helped to emphasize his motto, Father will provide. During the Depression, the Heavens provided for large numbers of the poor. Food was cooked and served to thousands of people, including non-followers. As platters of food were passed along rows of dining tables, each individual could take as much as he or she wanted, but whatever was taken had to be eaten. There was a rule: no food was to be wasted. The meals were lavish, with choices of meat, vegetables, and desserts at every sitting. No set fee was charged for the meals, so that diners could pay whatever they wished or could. While the food was available for free, most people contributed something for a meal. Several million people, both wealthy and poor, belonged to Father Divine's worldwide movement. He and his disciples were into the streets to talk to people and to gather followers. Father Divine preached that peace and life are wonderful. He spoke of honesty, reliability, and cleanliness as ideas that his followers must achieve and maintain. Those who belonged to the movement believed and followed the ideas. Some of them opened businesses where the word peace was displayed to identify Father Divine's followers and to assure customers of honest dealings. Father Divine's success was always a mystery. Wealthy whites donated large sums of money to his movement. He obtained great wealth even though large sums were spent maintaining the heavens. His income tax returns were investigated many times, but were always found to be in order. Undoubtedly, Father Divine was a businessman, as he was a religious leader. In 1965, after serving about 46 years as a religious leader, Father Divine died. His age, though not exactly known, has been estimated at somewhere between 88 and 100 years old. It's a big difference there, about 15 years or 13. One clergyman who gained national attention was Adam Clayton Powell Jr. of the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem. During the early days of the Depression, Powell's father, who was pastor of the church, established a relief bureau. Free food, clothing, fuel, and medical care were given to thousands of people daily. Powell Jr. was appointed director of the bureau. The younger Powell became a powerful leader. He joined the Jobs for Negro movement and gave it a new thrust. In 1937, with A. Philip Randolph of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and Reverend William Lloyd Imes of St. James Presbyterian Church, Powell formed the Greater New York Coordinating Committee for the Employment of Negroes. They always had names of organizations so that they could remember the difference between white and black organizations. The committee organized a black-out boycott of the Consolidated Edison Company. The aim of the boycott was to bring about the hiring of blacks for jobs other than those of porter or similar types of media work. In many Harlem homes, support was given the boycott by using candles on Tuesday nights, but this boycott was unsuccessful. In a new drive, Powell held a mass meeting to gather additional strength. He said, "Harlem is sick and tired of promises. The hour has struck to march." Powell's statement impressed a large number of people. A march to the Edison Company offices was organized. Soon there were long lines of people waiting to pay their bills with pennies and nickels. As a result of the clerks having to count each coin, work at the company offices slowed down. Other people formed picket lines in front of white-owned businesses on 125th Street, which is where everything ended up, like the Apollo Theater, which I was associated with in recordings upstairs over the Apollo Theater. White-owned businesses on 125th Street, which is probably mostly black now, the main business district in Harlem. It took months before the boycotts slowed down and picketing brought positive results. Finally, Consolidated Edison Company hired some blacks as clerical workers. The New York Telephone Company followed, but they went further than the electric company. The telephone company staffed an entire Harlem office with black personnel, including a black manager. An even greater success came when the Fifth Avenue Coach Company and the New York City Omnibus Corporation agreed to hire black mechanics and drivers for the first time. I'll finish this paragraph and then we will continue tomorrow or whenever the next taping is. And drivers for the first time in the history of New York City. These changes were noticed in other cities, and Powell became known throughout the country. We will continue this chapter, which is page 21, and we will perhaps go through page 27, depending upon the pictures. All right, I thank you very much for listening again today to me read from The Black Man in America, 1932 through 1954, by Florence Jackson. As I said before, I never actually read from this book before, and the readings and other information that I have was somewhat different than what's in here, and I believe this is simple and easy to understand. So the biggest problem is people don't like reading anymore. So I don't mind reading this to you, and you can listen to it as an audible, like you do on paid audibles of books of other people. So thank you very much again for listening. And this is Black History Month. celebration, and for it, I'm reading from this book, as well as I'll be reading some humanitarian stories for you, and I'll tell you about my new play. And may God bless you and keep you until we meet again. Gloria Keith, Action Speaks, Heritage Excellence Education Journal. Thank you very much for listening. God bless you.